at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395.
Hey, travelers, do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call, because the best prices are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. Our prices are too low to publish online. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next flight. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find ridiculously low prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next flight. Guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
855-325-1820. 855-325-1820. That's 855-325-1820.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395.
Good evening, Johnson County, and welcome to this week's episode of the Texas Transparency Project. The Texas Transparency Project airs most Thursdays at 5 p.m. here exclusively on JoCo Community Radio. JoCo Community Radio focus on all the ins and outs of Johnson County, Texas. I am your guest host, Kayla Lain, filling in for Greg Cooper. JoCo Community Radio has many shows and airs 24 hours a day. You can visit the JoCo Community Radio Facebook page to watch shows live or to see replays. Also, you can go to www.jococommunityradio.com where Apple and Android apps are available. Tune in to get the ins and outs of Johnson County, Texas. Here at the Texas Transparency Project, we focus on 3 topics and do what we can to shed light on how they affect all of us locally here in Johnson County. Number 1, Texas school politics. Number 2, Texas city politics. Number 3, Texas state politics, if they are applicable to us at the local level. You can also learn more about the Texas Transparency Project and our work at www.texastransparencyproject.org. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. And for school district resources and help navigating issues with local ISDs, we do partner with Families Engaged for effective education. Families Engaged works with elected officials on the local and state level, many school districts across Texas, but their real talent is helping parents navigate the complexities of their local ISDs and to help them preserve their parental rights. There is no one better to advise and assist all of us on school district issues than Families Engaged. They have a local chapter here in Johnson County, and they can be reached through their website at www.familiesengaged.org. My name is Kayla Lain, and as I said, I am tonight's guest host. I'm filling in for Greg Cooper. I am a Godley ISD school board trustee, and I am joined by Granbury ISD's trustees, Melanie Graft and Karen Lowery, and also citizens Lisa McDermott and Monica Brown. We will be discussing all things ISD as we enter the May election season with lots of school board elections and school bond elections that will be asking for your support in May. Specifically, we're talking about the state of the Texas public schools. Are they the modern day idols? Tools used by the ISDs to silence and intimidate parents, the importance of electing the right school board members and for the right reasons. If you ladies want to go ahead and introduce yourselves and why you got involved in school politics.
Hi, yes, thank you. So my name is Lisa, and I'm actually a newer citizen to Granbury. And I got involved with the kind of ISD and school board meetings based on censorship for one of the trustees, for Karen. And that was where I kind of first attended a meeting and saw all of the, or I shouldn't say all, many of the board members breaking their own, code of character. And I ended up filing a grievance. And then we had a grievance hearing and was just completely appalled at how everything was handled. And so that's just kind of how I ended up dipping my toe in.
Thank you.
I'm Karen Lowery. I am a trustee for GISD. I originally was asked to sit on the first book review committee. I was quite appalled to see the books that were in there and the books that they put back. So I said, well, I'm going to go speak at the board meetings. So for 8 months, I went in front of the board every month, and I got a lot of blank stares at me, and nobody said anything. So I decided to go ahead and run for school board. So I ran, I won, and went to the library and got censored. So I'm still fighting the fight.
Thank you.
Melanie Graft. I was born in California, raised in Wisconsin, and got to Texas as soon as I could. I have 3 teenagers, and in 2004, we moved from Euless to Granbury. And I figured it was a conservative, very conservative Christian town. So I became really kind of apathetic until my, at the time, 4-year-old daughter, we went into the public library and she picked up an LGBTQ picture book for kids. And I had mentioned to the librarian, I'm like, hey, it took away my parental rights. It's not age appropriate. And the story blew up, and the story went outside of our country. And I think you can probably still Google things and find it there. But at that point, I realized that something's wrong with our local government. And so that propelled me to be a precinct chair for the Hood County Republican Party. Did that for 5 years and was vice chair of elections because we had some issue with our elections as well. And then took a break in 2020 to fight cancer. And then in 2021 came back and ran for school board. And then because I have lots of time and nothing better to do, I filed to run for precinct chair again this year.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Monica Brown, and I moved to Granbury in 2020 to volunteer to take over a homeschool co-op 3-day program where we hire usually certified teachers. All of them are certified teachers. Anyway, in that process, we had a robotics program that blew up and became quite large. We began to host independent school districts to come to our program. We had 33 teams, 35 teams, eventually 50, 55 teams showed up from all over the state of Texas. I think we even had some outside the state of Texas. But anyway, we ended up competing in Granbury at the middle school and the high school. And I was a volunteer. So every time they asked me to volunteer, they asked me to serve food because I'm also a foodie on the side. And anyway, so I am in the library. I'm looking around thinking it's kind of dark and crazy in there. And one of my parents knew Melanie, and Melanie knew I was in there. So anyway, long story short, they knew we were complaining about what's going on here. This is really dark. We didn't know there were sexually explicit books. We just thought it was really, paranormal, all that kind of stuff, just lots of it, not just a tiny bit, but a lot of it, overload. And so I ended up being on that same book review committee with Karen Lowery and watched how the committee was made up of some pretty, the people who made it up did not choose to go against the inappropriate material and said they supported it, put it back very quickly. And it was a dog and pony show. They tried to make the people in Granbury think that everything was okay when it wasn't. And it's been a fight ever since. So I've been speaking at school board meetings for 2 years now and worked really hard to get Karen Lowery to become a trustee there as one of the people to try to make change to get it back in line with what's good for students. So that's really what's happened for me as well.
Thank you. Well, everyone, my name is Kayla Lain. If you do not know me, I'm a Godley ISD school board trustee. I got elected in 2023. That was my second time to run for school board. And I got involved in Godley ISD school politics back during the mask mandate. And my children actually never wore a mask. I got my chiropractor to write a medical exemption for them. Of course, the school district didn't want to accept it because he wasn't an MD. And I fought tooth and nail, and they did accept it. My kids were the only kids in Godley ISD that did not wear a mask. In fact, I taught other parents how to go about getting a mask exemption as well. No other parents even tried to do that, which still blows my mind. But what I realized when trying to talk to our school board about the mask mandate was that they had this restrictive BED local policy, and they wouldn't let me talk about it because it wasn't on the agenda. And so after attending board meetings for several months and being denied the opportunity to speak, and once again, I wasn't fighting for my kids. I was fighting for other parents' kids because my kids weren't wearing a mask, but I saw what it was doing to other kids. Was denied the opportunity to speak, learned about this policy and that they were restrictive in agenda items only for public comment. And so it took me several board meetings, and I went to a PTO meeting because I figured surely at a parent teacher organization meeting, I can talk about my concern I have with the masks on our children. So I was also denied the opportunity to speak at a PTO meeting. And they even had a police officer there and said if I started talking about masks, I would be escorted out. So I was just blown away at the complete lack of concern and violation of constitutional First Amendment rights. So I have ran on this issue, and my first board meeting ever, they changed the policy to require 3 trustees to get anything added to the agenda, so I couldn't get anything added. I've asked several times for other board members to support me in adding BED local to an agenda. It has not happened. Lots of citizens have talked in public comment asking for this to be revised. Not only have they not supported me in getting it on the agenda, but also in November of 2023, our board, all except for myself, voted to restrict our policy even more for BED local to include audible utterances are not allowed, which is super vague. What is an audible utterance? They can also restrict seating for the public to designated areas. There's also a designated recording area now, which is so far that you can't even hear what's being said from recordings. Our district does not live stream the meeting, so that's very restrictive to not be able to hear what a citizen is trying to record. And then they also can remove someone from a meeting for a variety of reasons now, including an attendee that's blocking another attendee from seeing. It's super vague. And then I've also seen them weaponize BED local policy to trespass parents because of speech and send trespass warnings to parents. It's a horrible policy. Like I said, I've seen it weaponized. I was asked back, was it last month that y'all changed this policy? February?
No, ours will change in November, right?
It was November.
Was it November? Okay. I believe it was February where I was asked to speak at a Brock ISD meeting, and they had on their agenda to revise their BED local policy. And I had seen one of their trustees put out a plea on social media for citizens to come show up because they wanted to restrict their public comments to agenda items only. And I did some digging on all of our Region 11 for our ESC, which is our Educational Service Center. And out of all of there's, I believe, 77 districts, there's only about 6 districts that restrict free speech to agenda items only. And I did the math, and it's 6%. So only 6% of ISDs in our region are this restrictive with free speech. And what I filed a grievance on this because it was weaponized when I was running for school board in 2022, and I was tried to be trespassed. My grievance was denied. But one thing I told them was that not only is it a violation of the U.S. and Texas Constitution First Amendment rights, but it's also a violation of the legal policy. You know, TASB Legal quotes those areas of the Constitution, and it says that the district shall take no action abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition their board for redress of grievances. So this is a violation of that right. So I showed up at this Brock ISD meeting. I was floored at how many citizens they had to come speak at their meeting. The public comment took about an hour, which also was super encouraging to me that the board allowed that, because I know other districts like Fort Worth limit their public comment to 30 minutes, but they allowed their citizens to speak. About 20 of us. I was the last speaker. And I shared how I'm from Godley ISD and how I've seen this policy weaponized. And thankfully, the board did listen to what the citizens wanted, and they denied this policy. But I found out that Granbury ISD also has this policy. So I reached out to some trustees and to Miss Brown to ask their thoughts on this. And so I invited y'all tonight to talk about this, because I believe that there is a reason that our Constitution allows us this First Amendment right. And I have seen that when you take away freedom of speech, all of the freedoms go by the wayside. For me, I think it's the tipping point. And so why people should be concerned when their freedom of speech are abridged on. And just wanted to see y'all's thoughts. So feel free to jump in and share.
We definitely have seen it when you were talking about we have a gentleman that wanted to come speak 3 times in a row. He was denied being able to speak because they said he didn't fill out his paperwork correctly, or he didn't live here, or they always had a reason for not allowing him to do it. And they said, well, you just can't do it. So they are being very restrictive in our meetings. They put up all the signs that have the penal code on there. If anybody says anything, they're quick to jump right on them. But yet there are people that are allowed to speak and say things and interrupt the meeting, even though some aren't.
There's also a large marshal presence at our meeting too. So it's very intimidating, for the public as well. But also, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but if it's not an agenda item, we only give them 1 minute to speak now. And keep in mind, too, that they have to say their name and their address. Well, by the time you get done saying your name and your address, whose business is it anyway, especially when it's that volatile, I wouldn't feel comfortable wanting everyone to know where I lived. But by the time you're done with that, then what do you have? 30 seconds, 45 seconds maybe to say something?
Well, they've also taken our non-agenda item and made them once a quarter. You can come, and they wanted to have it more like a town hall in a different room. You can talk back and forth. They'll answer you, but it's still very restrictive.
But I will say, if it's teachers or, administration that want to come up and land blast Karen or myself, that's perfectly acceptable. And they'll even during the public meeting, if we're trying to speak, they'll speak over us, mock us, and our board doesn't do anything to, point of order or anything to try to correct that. So it's very biased.
I definitely saw that in Godley at our last school board meeting. They allowed several teachers to berate me for a solid 11 minutes, even allowed one teacher to go over her 3 minutes. I had a friend get a trespass warning letter because she went over 3 seconds, but they allowed this teacher to go over her time. And I allowed them to say what they had to say. And I valued the right for them to come and say what they did. So I never interrupted them. And I thanked them for coming and exercising their First Amendment rights. And that was what I ran on in my campaign, and that I value free speech. And I wish everyone had the opportunity to come and do what they did, but they don't. And I've seen people trespass for way less. So, like you said, it's very selective on who gets to break the rules and who doesn't.
The gentleman that I had mentioned earlier tried to come in at one point in time, and they said, no, you're not allowed in. And he was talking to the lady. He said, I just want to go in and I want to say this. I want to say this. And she ended up calling the marshals over, and they took him out and said he was trespassing.
Well, even for myself, when we had our grievance hearing, so when I attended the meeting specifically in relation to Karen's censorship, we saw the rest of the board just completely, vile comments, rude, talk over them, both Karen and Melanie. And so I ended up filing a grievance because when I looked back at the board policy, when I looked back at what the characteristics of each trustee and what their code of conduct, multiple times they violated those. And so I completed a grievance. Well, they, of course, set the hearing date on an inconvenient day early in the morning when people have a really hard time, attending the meeting. And they gave us initially, I think it was supposed to be 3 minutes to speak. And so my husband and I were both going to go speak. And so we had what we were going to say. And then we find out, sorry, it's only 1 minute. And so we kind of had to, okay, well, this is what we're going to say off of our original 3 minutes. Well, he got called on first. Mind you, I filled out the paperwork for both he and I. So it was exactly the same. After he spoke, they cut it off. So I never got to speak during the public comments for that meeting. And I was one of the ones who filed a grievance. And so there was a few others that never got to speak after that. So, and my husband was saying some of the points that we had brought up in our grievance hearing, and I think they shut it off because I don't think they wanted people to hear what we were saying. It did not show the board, specifically certain board members and the superintendent. It didn't show them in a good light. And so they completely abridged my right to free speech, and I wasn't allowed to. And then on top of that, we were told in the grievance hearing, we could not record the audio or couldn't take a video, but we would be guaranteed a copy of that audio. And so we just had to request it. So I requested it per instructions for the board president, and I got my letter stating that they were denying me my own audio recording. So, yeah.
And
Which is that's a violation of Texas law. It's a one-way party recording state. You don't even have to notify anyone that you're recording if you're part of the conversation. So that's just incredible.
Your grievance hearing was on September 11th, wasn't it? Yeah.
Early in
And
the morning.
I sent an email to the superintendent, and I'm like, this is not appropriate. And it was, I believe, at 7:00 in the morning.
It was.
Early.
September 11th, 7:00 in the morning. We can't do better. We can, but they don't want to.
And within a week, if I remember correctly,
Yes,
it
yes.
was set within a week of us submitting grievances.
Yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be that they work with you on your schedule. That's what it says, but that's not what they did.
And we had several emails back and forth. I emailed the board, including the superintendent, requesting it to be changed. I had to switch my work schedule because a week out, I already knew I was working that day. And my husband had to switch his schedule so that we could attend the hearing. And they did not work with us. They didn't work with anybody.
No.
Wow.
I think there's possibly a safety issue too when they say you have to wait 3 months before you can bring something up. Because if something happens today, you've got right now, I think it's 2 more months before you get to speak again at a public comment. So that's, I don't think that's going to make for progress.
When the concerning thing is bullying, there's a lot of bullying that I see on some of the Facebook groups where parents are complaining about just the sheer bullying, attacks, you name it, at the schools. And yet if I'm that parent and that's not on the agenda, then so I have to wait until the next quarterly meeting to bring up the issue of bullying so that all other parents know what's going on, right? You think of it like news. It's no longer newsworthy at that point. So if it's dead and gone, then the rest of the parents aren't going to care. Maybe by 3 months later, the issue's fine.
Right.
Maybe that's the intent right there, I think.
Yeah, they hope that it just goes away.
Yep.
And I don't know about y'all, trustees, but are you notified that someone's denied the opportunity to speak, or do they tell you at the end of the meeting, or do you not even know unless someone comes up and tells you they weren't able to speak?
We have a new online thing. You don't sign up at the meeting anymore. You have to go online 72 hours previous. I'm never told about who's speaking, who isn't speaking. I actually ask for the quarterly meeting, what are the subjects, who's talking, and they said, well, there were 6 people signed up. That was all the information I
Well,
got.
another thing, as a citizen, you won't get a notice until like Friday at 3 to 5, somewhere in there, you get an email that says, okay, agenda is up. So you have Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday. And then if you don't turn it in, I think they turned it to noon. They were going to do 9 a.m. on Monday mornings, that you'd have to get into the system, turn in that you want to speak, know what you want to talk about, and get it all turned in for that meeting that night. So that's really short notice. And one of the days is Sunday. So it's like, who wants to do this on a Sunday anyway? And if you had any desire to research or to collaborate or to talk to anybody, you can't in that frame of time. So they've really taken that 72 hours and put it right at the bare minimum of what you can do.
Yeah, so in Godley, we're not told until after the meeting, or sometimes we're not even told that someone was denied the opportunity to speak. And so, in my opinion, it goes well above what some administrator has the authority to do at a board meeting. Because, if they say that so-and-so is off topic, but I believe that their speech is on agenda topic, but I don't have the authority to say yes or no that they can't speak. Some administrator is getting that authority when that's really not their authority, because it should be the board that's presiding over the meeting.
Yes.
That's a question that I have, actually. Then you just made me think of that. So who's the one that gets the list? Because somebody's calling names, correct? Somebody's calling out the
board
next
president.
Board
So
president.
then So there is no, it doesn't get passed out amongst everyone. So really it's just potentially maybe, I don't even know if the superintendent knows, but possibly the superintendent and or only the board president.
Yeah.
And then nobody else gets to know. Because realistically, if there was a list, I could sit there, okay, this person wasn't here, and these people didn't get to speak at all.
I've never seen a list. I do believe it's just the board president and superintendent.
Yeah, and I think they also put them in an order of speaking that they want to put them in.
Definitely. I'll say we watched a mother who had put several students through the Granbury Independent School District recently remove her son. And the son came to speak, a sister came to speak, the mother came to speak, and the board president at that time started chatting with her ahead of time, questioning whether or not she should even be speaking. Have you gone through the motions? Because if you look at the BED policy, it says they can decide if they think you've already tried to go through proper channels, so they can stop you right there. And basically they did. She basically just sort of wilted and walked away and she hasn't walked away. She's still fighting this, and her son does not go to the public school right now, but because she could not get resolved. But it was really sad to watch that they had been so brave, and it isn't comfortable for the public to walk up in front of a bunch of people, and some of them hecklers, and get up there and stand and then speak, try to get it in a certain amount of time. Anyway, there's not a lot of heart going on. It's really troubling to watch what's happening to parents.
Very much so.
Yeah, I agree. And I know, like in Godley, and one thing I commended the citizens of Brock for was that they had so many people that showed up to speak. And I mean, we're lucky if we can get 3 parents to come to a board meeting about a very critical topic. And so, it, like in Godley, if we have 3 people and it's 3 minutes, that's 9 minutes of your board meeting. I've always said, I don't care what they talk on. We can give people 9 minutes of our meeting to say whatever it is they want to say. And what are we so afraid of? Like, free speech is not scary. And, it's just like the teachers that came and said what they did and honestly publicly humiliated me. I can only let that affect me. That's a personal choice that I have, right? And so I have thick skin because I'm an elected official. And newsflash, if you are an elected official and you don't have thick skin, you should really rethink what you're doing, because you need thick skin as an elected official. And they have the right to publicly criticize you. That's a First Amendment right. And so those teachers had every right to do what they did. And so I think that there's just a lot of people that are in government positions that don't need to be there.
Right. Well, I wanted to say something about Karen. When she discovered the situation with the books, then she ran for office. She received 12,000 votes in Granbury. That's really huge. But as soon as she got on the board, I think it was one of the very first meetings, they shut it down so that she could not put anything on the agenda unless she has at least 3 trustees. Before that, if it had been the way it was, she and Melanie could put something on the agenda. So now they're like handcuffed and muzzled about what they can do. And I don't think the public really realized what happened when that happened, but we were like, this isn't right. This is not right. This is nothing right about this, that representing how many thousands of voters, both of these ladies, and they won't let them put something on the agenda.
So that was changed after y'all got elected?
Well, it was actually changed right after I was elected.
Okay, that's when
because
it
I
was.
had wanted to sign the Jared Patterson, he was a House rep, signed his pledge about, the inappropriate books. And then I was also brought forward the Tim Tebow bill, hoping that the homeschool kids could participate in UIL activities since their parents pay for property tax too. And that's kind of an interesting story because it was back in June right after I was elected, and they had a special meeting where it was really a setup is what it was. So they bullied me in the back for an hour and 45 minutes, and I was told I was too controversial, told who I could and couldn't hang out with. And then we went out to the public after an hour and 45 minutes of just, we went out to the public, and that's where they changed the rule. They changed it from 1 trustee.
And that's been 2 years ago, 3?
Yeah.
Okay, well, after the break, we'll get right back into that, Melanie.
Okay.
Have you ever met a single person in your life that enjoys paying taxes? No one does. If you can't sleep at night because you have a huge problem with the IRS I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Welcome back to JoCo Community Radio. JoCo Community Radio is a member of EMG, a radio and podcast collective, proudly serving communities like Johnson and Tarrant County, Texas. We are live 365 days on the TuneIn Radio Network and on our station app. Check out our lineup and more at tuninjoco.com. We thank our valued partners in helping us amplify the voices of our communities. You heard the commercials. Be sure to connect with Todd Hurd and Associates, attorneys at law, and use code JOCO2024 for 25% off your first order at thetiffy.com. And join the Swipe Nation today and save on your credit card processing at swipenationusa.com, locally owned and operated. Reach out to Tiffany at joe.co@jococommunityradio.com for advertising rates as low as $50 a month. And we are back, Karen, and I would love for you to, Melanie,
Okay.
I would love for you to finish your story on how they changed the agenda policy for board members to submit an agenda.
Okay, so it was actually it was June 2nd, right after I was elected, and I didn't know what it was, a special meeting, so I didn't know what I was walking into, but it was interesting, and it was funny because the meeting was noticed under section 551.071, and not to go into that too much, but when this happened, it was an illegal meeting. I talked to someone at the Attorney General's office, and they were like, yeah, that wasn't properly noticed. So they didn't even properly notice the meeting. But I walk in and I have no idea what it's about, this special meeting. And I sit down and they were going around the table saying they wanted everyone to say why they ran for school board. So we're going around the table, and of course they had me go last, and I'm like, this is weird. And everyone's saying why, and nobody's saying anything, why they ran for school board. And they get to me, and the president at the time says, so I say why I ran, and she's like, so you had an agenda. And so I was, like I said, I was for an hour and 45 minutes of pretty much being bullied. And, I was told who I could and couldn't hang out with. I was told that I was too controversial. This just went on and on for an hour and 45 minutes. And then when we went out to the public, that's where they voted to change it from one trustee being able to place something onto the agenda. They wanted to do 3 people, but there was such a public outcry that they just did 2 at that time. And so I was also questioned, why does the public show up? Why is the public showing up to speak so much? Like, well, they have a constitutional right to show up. Maybe that's why they're showing up. But just an hour and 45 minutes of just bullying. And, I know in our district, and I think in other districts, bullying is a huge problem. But I can tell you in our district, it's because it's starting at the top and it trickles down. Kids mimic what they see. So we have a bullying problem because the people at the very, very top are bullying.
Absolutely. We have adults that are bullying, and then we
Mhm.
wonder why kids are bullying. And so the same thing happened with me. It was my first ever meeting where I was sworn into office. And at that meeting on the agenda was the policy for agenda items. And of course, I don't know what's being changed because I, at this time, wasn't receiving board books because this was just my sworn in meeting. And then they want to immediately go in and, vote to approve that policy. And I said, I would like to motion to table this item until I have the opportunity to hear about it because I don't even know what your discussions were. Plus, I showed that they were having these discussions in closed meetings because they had never talked about this publicly. And supposedly they had discussed this for 3 months prior, but not to the public. So they were discussing this policy in executive session or some other small meeting, not in a public board meeting, totally violating Texas Open Meetings Act. And so I wanted to table this item until I had an opportunity to hear what they wanted to change. And then, of course, it died for lack of second. Nobody would second my motion. And so then they voted to approve the policy, and it changed it to where from the history of ever in Godley, one board member could submit an item for the agenda. It changed it to 3 board members. And as y'all know, that's super difficult because if you have a board that's uncooperative with you, like I have with my board, to get other board members elected could take years to get 3 seats on the board to be able to actually make change and to get items on the agenda so we could talk about it. And then, like I've told the public, you don't even have a right to speak on anything unless it's on the agenda. So essentially, them silencing me is silencing my constituents as well because I can't get something on the agenda for you to talk about.
Right.
So,
well, and we're told by TASB over and over again that, you're not here to represent your constituents. You're a trustee. So like you're supposed to go along, but okay, if that's then why did I have to run? Then why did people have to vote for me if I don't represent my constituents? I'm sorry, but I don't care what TASB says. I was elected by the people and I serve them. But that's not how we're trained. That's not what they try to, get in your head. And so that's another huge problem too. And that's a big disconnect for me. It's like if people elected me and this is what I ran on, and now you're telling me I don't represent the very people who elected me, then why are we elected?
Exactly. In my Summer Leadership Institute training that I went to this past summer, I noticed that was a huge push from TASB that as a school board, you don't represent the citizens that voted you in. You represent the district and you're to group think and do what you're told. And I've always been very vocal against that because I will always, always, always represent the taxpayers and the citizens that elected me. Because for one thing, that's what I was. I was just a parent and I was just a citizen and I was just a taxpayer. And I watched myself get silenced and bullied and intimidated and for issues to go unresolved. And so I will always stand up for those people. But you're right. That's not what we're trained to do. We're trained to just do what the superintendent wants.
Exactly.
How do you get it back to 1?
The board can set policy changes. So I guess in my instance, I'd have to have 3 board members that would have that policy up for discussion and action on an agenda. And then we could go about changing that back to 1.
You'd have to have the majority then to make the vote.
Correct. And you'd have to
have pressure from parents to get them to do that, right? Citizens.
Yeah. And then you can't get parents to come speak about it unless it's on the agenda. So it's just a wicked circle, right? It's a circus.
Well, and
honestly.
it's a retaliatory culture too. So a lot of parents whose kids are in the district are afraid to speak up because they know that they'll retaliate against their children. And so it's like we need parents to get involved, but at the same time, I understand why they're so scared.
It's very sad.
Right. It is. And kind of speaking to that, the BED is public participation also. And recently we have found out that a parent, PTO person and the group volunteering at one of the schools. And because she was seen speaking and dealing with Melanie and with me, they are now retaliating against her, and they're now telling them that they don't need volunteers, that they have staff to do this. And they went to them and they said, well, we can't get everything done in 4 hours. They're telling them they can have 4 hours a week all on one day to do their volunteering. And that's when they said, well, we've got staff. We really don't need any volunteers. So they're limiting the parents yet again to be able to go into the school to help, to provide. And they're also telling them what they can and can't do with the money that the PTO has raised. And that's against rules also.
And this is where I kind of lost. I had enough. And so I went ahead and put it on social media and pretty much said, okay, where's my censor at this point? Because, oh my gosh, I dared to volunteer. And now this is what's happening because this other person, was seen with me. And so I kind of stuck it up there. It's been really, really quiet. But at this point, I'm just like, you know what? Enough is enough. This is absolutely ridiculous because we're told, Karen and I are told, you guys don't do enough. You're not in the public. You don't volunteer. Yeah. You don't this and that. And then when we do, this is the kind of stuff that happens. I mean, this is insane. So you can't win if you do, and you don't win if you don't. And so I just stuck it on social media. So I'm waiting for my punishment, whatever that's going to be, whether it be a censor, but I just stuck it out there because at this point, I feel like the public really needs to know what's going on. And I'm sick and tired of being quiet, and I'm not going to be quiet anymore.
Yeah, so similar here. I get berated all the time about, why don't you volunteer? Well, for one thing, I'm a homeschool mom and I have a newborn baby. But I said, you know what? My kids go to co-op 3 days a week, a homeschool co-op locally in Godley. And I said, so I will turn in my application to volunteer. So I did and passed the background check and everything. But I said, I have one caveat. I have a newborn and I'm her primary caregiver. Don't have childcare for her. Said, so I would have to bring her with me if I volunteer. And I was told, oh, that's a safety concern. We can't have newborns in the building. So I was denied the opportunity to volunteer. And that's something the public doesn't really know, but they're still, every time I say anything, well, why don't you volunteer? Well, I have tried. I put in my application, but guess what? I volunteer at my kids' homeschool co-op 3 days a week, and I bring my baby and they don't see it as a safety concern. So I think that's so silly, but you're right. They'll find anything.
But the bullying is not a safety concern.
Yeah. That's the crazy.
Just a little bitty newborn, super unsafe.
She's gonna do so much damage. And I'm like you too. I have 3 children, and so my primary. If they have an event, I need to be at their event because my kids don't go to GISD either, which I'm mocked for that. But let me just tell the public, these are some of the reasons why my children don't go to GISD. It would be insane. And I've told the superintendent too, I would be absolutely insane. The way that they bully Karen and myself, why would I ever what parent would subject their children to that? Because do I really think that they're not going to do that to my children or that they wouldn't do that to your children?
And see, like me, my kids were in Godley for several years until I pulled them out to homeschool them 2 years ago. And the first time I ran for school board, my kids were still in Godley ISD. I actually pulled them out after my campaign because my daughter started having issues in school where she had never had issues before. And I feared there was some retaliation going on. But I've been very vocal when I ran the second time and my kids were not in Godley that, hey, I'm running because I'm fighting for other people's kids. I'm not selfish. I care about all the kids in our community, not just mine. And I'm very blessed to be able to stay home with my kids and homeschool them. And there's a lot of moms that can't do that. Right. So I'm fighting for those parents that have no choice but to send their kids to public school, and they deserve a better school. Yep. And you're the same way. You don't feel comfortable sending your kids to the school, but you're there and you're volunteering to serve on the board because you want to make change for those other kids.
Absolutely. Well said.
Well, and when you talk about the bullying from the top down, what I've seen happen to Karen and also to Melanie is very blatant, very bold, very public. So anybody who questions that needs to go back and look and listen and see the things that have been said and documented, because I filed some challenges on that. And even the people who were doing the bullying were the ones who got to vote my challenge down, which is pretty astounding, but regardless of it, very bold, very, very out of order, breaking code of conduct for board members, breaking ethics for teachers. Absolutely poor example. 2 men specifically on the board, and the words they used and the way they spoke to these 2 ladies, there was quite an outcry about it. But it's very real. It's not just a subtle, they're kind of pushing around in the background. It's in public too.
I saw a couple of comments out of the corner of my eye. A gentleman named Austin said that Karen and Melanie, y'all never bring new ideas to the board. All you do is say no. So I thought y'all might want to respond to that.
Well, I did bring new ideas to the board, and I was punished. One of them was the Tim Tebow bill, and then so yeah, we do, but they're just shot down. So
If we try to put them on the agenda, they don't allow them. We can't bring any new ideas.
right.
Well, and another example is there's a bond coming up, and the community has given them examples. You read your examples out loud at the last meeting and shared it on Facebook media so people could read what your ideas were. They didn't like them. They didn't want them. They have an actual school building that they're using for the administration to be housed in, but they want us to buy into a bond to build another building. And we're like, well, how about you use that one? Even if it's difficult for you, that would be great. They have empty buildings that they can put the admin in, but they do not want to talk about it. So it's too bad. But some of the things that they want to talk about, they are like, we're not going to talk about it. So it looks as though they're not putting things on there, but it's like, no. And even this most recent bond situation, people were not aware. The public at large was not aware. They called in a small group of people. I don't even know if it's on the website now, like the details of the bond. It wasn't even there when we had our meeting the other night. It's like, how do you have a meeting and how do you have an election? And you don't even have details on the website. And the superintendent said, well, if we do that, we get a lot of criticism. I'm like, well, you got to give us some kind of bare bones or something to talk about if you want us to do this. Yeah. But they don't want to listen to frugal ideas. They don't want to listen to out of the box ideas. It's only let's build and do brand new. And then do a lot of sky is falling things too. Like the whole bus situation is really sad.
Yeah. So we had our long range planning committee stood up sometime last fall, and the letter so I actually found out about this through a third party because I'm on the board. And I didn't even know that we stood a committee back up because our bond failed last year. And so I had a member of the public reach out to me and say, why am I being asked to serve on some long range planning committee? I'm like, I don't know. Can I see what you received? And so she sent me the letter and it said that the board stood this committee up. I'm on the board and I don't even know about the committee. And so I'm like, well, that's interesting.
That's what happened.
So I reached out to the superintendent. I'm like, when was this committee stood up? Because you're lying. You're saying the board stood this committee up, but I'm on the board. I didn't even know about it. How are these members selected? I think each board member should be able to put several people on the committee. And so my idea was just kind of like, but then he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll put you on the committee and I hope that makes you feel better. I'm like, okay, sure. Then I find out that these committee meetings are behind closed doors and the public's not invited to attend, which in my mind is a total violation of Texas Open Meetings Act because a bond is public money and that's a public concern and that should be an open meeting. So I found out after the fact because I was advertising these meetings to the public because I assumed that it would be a public meeting because it's highly of public interest. I find out after the fact that a member of the public was denied access to our first meeting. And so I blew up about it because that really upset me. And so I had a back and forth between, I called TASB Legal, first of all, and I found out, is this even legal? I feel like it's a violation of TOMA. And TASB Legal told me, yes, it is. That should be notated on a public agenda because a bond is a public interest item. And so they, of course, tell you it's not legal advice. You need to contact your board attorney. So I do. And I find out that our superintendent controls our board attorney and he can't speak to me unless the superintendent gives him permission. So shot down like that. So I said, you know what? We're going to make a little bit of a stand. And I said, so I want the public, the members that do want to come. There was 2 citizens that wanted to attend these meetings. I said, come to the second meeting and video record them denying you the opportunity to come. We were super peaceful, very kind. I just said, hey, here's the law. This is what it says. This is a violation of their constitutional rights. This is a violation of the Texas Open Meetings Act. And it was the superintendent's assistant said, I don't want to hear the law. I don't need to hear the law. I'm not in charge. I said, well, then who's in charge? She said, the superintendent. And I said, well, then we want to speak to the superintendent. Oh, you can't speak to him now. He's busy. And I'm like, okay. So anyways, we were denied. And then we were asked to leave the building. And I said, excuse me, but what policy or law are we violating? Why do we have to leave the building? And so the SRO, we have our own ISD police. I don't know if y'all have your own ISD police, but he comes up and he tells us we've been asked to leave. And if we don't leave, we're subject to arrest. And I said, excuse me, but did you not take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And do you realize that this is a violation of constitutional rights? And he said, no, it's not. This is a private building. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, but in Texas, schools are public buildings. This is a public building. So, and of course, I was super nice and respectful, but I know the law. I study the law. I know what our rights are. And so I very nicely told them, you're violating our rights. But then because I'm not like they want to think that I'm some MAGA extremist, we peacefully left the building. And then I went outside and I read the law for everyone else, because we were live streaming, of this is what I wanted to tell the superintendent's assistant, of this is what the law says, but she refused to hear it. And I said, we're not done with this fight, because I believe the public should be able to attend these meetings. And so I voted no when they brought the board recommendation for the bond, because I said, I don't feel comfortable calling something that the public was actively shut out on. And then those two citizens that tried to come to that long range meeting were threatened with a trespass warning letter. One of them, he never even said a word. All he did was video record from his phone. That was so egregious that warranted a trespass warning letter. And I'm like, how do you get trespass and you never even uttered a word? I mean, literally, I'm blown away. So,
well, and the part that boggles my mind is, so we're going to ask the taxpayers to go into more debt. So wouldn't you think that if you're going to ask somebody for money, because that's what you're doing, for money, that you would treat them with respect? But instead, we're taking away their free speech. We're threatening to lock them up. It's like, I just don't understand the mentality. Where did we get to a point with the public schools where they just, that this treatment is okay? But then, and at the same time, it would be like if you were to ask someone in your family for a loan and you mistreat them and you verbally abuse them, you really think that, I mean, why are they surprised when these bonds fail?
Or you ask them for a loan, but you don't tell them what you're going to be using the money
for. Pass it to see what's in it. That sounds familiar with Congress.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with the bond too, is that you're asking the taxpayers to go into their own pocket, right? And with the bond, most everything on the bond is always a need, right? I use air quotes, it's a need. And realistically, if you need something at home, but you don't have the money, do you just go asking people for money because you need something? No, you have to maybe rebudget or more frugal, or like Monica was saying, okay, think outside the box, because especially in this economy, people can't just, oh yeah, let me just throw another couple $1,000s at it. And so that's the thing. If we all have to reassess our budgets, given the economy or given whether or not we can afford something, then our school district should do the same.
Well, and never mind all the trends, the downtrend in enrollment, the uptrend in other alternative ways to educate students. It's happening all over. There's several school districts right now that are overdone, and they have empty buildings in Fort Worth, Frisco, Richardson. I think all three of those. It's a trend, and they need to pay attention to that, because, and then in our area, they control the narrative. So when you go in to speak, if there's two items that you want to talk about, bond being one and maybe bullying or something else that's on the agenda, you only get 3 minutes. So boy, you better go fast if you're going to talk about both of those, which restricts us again. So they need to pay attention to the trends here, but they're controlling what the people think. And then they make you and me look bad, like you don't care about kids because you won't buy a bond.
Look, I love education. I love it so much. I pay for it twice. I send my daughter to private school, and then I pay my property tax.
Right.
And Monica too. I mean, I'm not anti-education. It's the biggest bill in my house.
Yep.
But another thing to think about too is, regardless of what you think about school choice, look at the last election and all the House reps that just won that are pro school choice. And I'm not saying that's the answer here, but when Monica's talking about downsizing, now we know that's a big agenda for Governor Abbott. And now look at all the, House reps that were not reelected and those that were, that are looking at school choice. So it kind of goes into the trend that you're talking about with the downsizing.
And that you speak of the election, that whole thing is disgusting and sickening as well, because Governor Abbott donated $500,000 almost to Helen Kerwin. Where did he get that money? I mean, did he get into office to get rich or what? I mean, he had $500,000 personally to donate to a campaign. Like, that should totally not be allowed. And so, I mean, there was bullying in that campaign as well. And I will just say right now, I am 100% against vouchers, because I don't want the government controlling anything.
Absolutely.
I am for small government. I homeschool my kids for a reason, because the government has ruined education. And now the government comes in, oh, I have the cure, I'm going to fix it. And I think not.
Right. I'm with you. Why don't we talk about math and reading scores and how to accomplish better ones, because that's not even hardly a discussion.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to what you were saying, the demographic study that was used for our bond is 2 to 3 years old, and it's showing an upward trend. But anybody that's been around or paying any attention in the last year, year and a half, 2 years, we are not in the same place we were a few years ago.
But its 10-year projection, if I remember correctly, was somewhere around 2,800 new enrolled students, correct?
Yes.
So 161 million for a potential of 2,800 new students in a 10-year period.
And I don't think they're accounting for those kids in that amount that are going to do homeschool, private school. I've never seen where they're just assuming that they're all going to go to the public school. So that to me is inaccurate.
They're also making it like these are all family homes, and they're not. In Granbury in particular, it's a retirement community. Yes, there's families there, but many of the houses that are being built are not being built for families in the first place. But when you're telling everyone the sky is falling, that's what you claim. It's all this growth. Well, growth is true, but we need to look at the growth to see, well, what part of it is actual family oriented dwellings? Because if it's not, if it's for 2 or 3 people over age 50, you're probably not going to have children in that household. Very few of them will have children.
Or price point for the community. Where I used to live, the affluency rose, and now a parent with young parents with young kids couldn't afford to live there.
Right.
So the school enrollment continued to drop because the cost to move into that city started increasing. So if Granbury already has a pretty high retirement community, and if housing prices, are increasing. I saw a post on Facebook where somebody had asked, like, where are you guys moving to in Granbury? Because I can't afford a house or rent here. And I think the person said they were 25 years old. So that's a prime age for somebody with kids who would be going through the ISD.
Happened in Frisco. Empty schools.
Yeah. And back to vouchers, Tracy said the agenda with school choice from Abbott is to capture all the children under government control, which is absolutely right. Because with vouchers, I've seen a meme where it shows 4 lanes on a highway. And so it's like you have the public school lane, you have the homeschool lane, you have the private school lane. I can't remember what the one was. But now if with vouchers, you're going to merge them all into one lane. It's all government lane, right?
With government money
and
comes
so
government restrictions.
Yeah.
I know the school that my daughter goes to, a private school, they don't want any government money because they want their Christian school, and they don't want them interfering and telling. And I'm fine. We've been paying double for education for quite a while now. We have a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So, leave it.
Right. Yeah. And I went to one of the campaign events that Helen Kerwin was there and brought up an idea, which I've said several times, that I think the true choice would be like, we have a homestead exemption. There should be a homeschool private school exemption. So you just pay less in taxes because you have an exemption there that lowers the amount you're paying on your home in taxes. Let the people keep more of their money, and that's true choice, because government choice, as we know, is not true choice.
That's
It comes with carrot strings, and we don't want those. So we have just a little under a minute left. Any final thoughts? I will say there is an election coming up for both Granbury and Godley. There are trustees that are up for re-election. So make sure you're voting in the right people in those seats, because freedom of speech is a huge issue. Bonds, all these other huge issues. The right people need to be in those seats. And so just take a second. Last thoughts.
My last thoughts will just be for parents and the community members to get involved, research.
Absolutely. Get involved, get out and vote, and make sure you know who you're voting for.
Yeah, be informed about who you vote for, and please, please, please stand up. They're not as scary as they look.
That's right. Get involved. We need you. We need everybody to show up.
Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County.